So shalom and greetings. We thank you for joining us with the follow-up discussions of our message that we just covered on Should Christianity Be Sold, Part 2. So we're going to open it up now for any questions, comments, and or concerns of the message that we just covered. So I'm going to open it up now for discussion.
Hey, shalom, Brother Jeff.
Shalom, Mark.
You know, my friend, I'm so glad that you first allow us to ask questions, which is uncommon in the Christian church and many other religions. As a matter of fact, they don't really open up for questions, comments, or concerns. So thank you for doing that. My friend, as I listened to this presentation, I was thinking along events and timelines, because there was a lot of definitions around what selling actually can entail, and you said bookmark several spots in the selling and the definition thereof to really understand what selling of Christianity would entail. But then as we started to get into some of the dates and timelines and events, I realized that the second century was 100 AD to 200 AD. And the Roman Catholic Church, as I understand it, came online in the 4th century. Around 325, it was legalized under Emperor Constantine. Is that your understanding also?
Yes.
So who was selling if Catholicism wasn't formed until the 4th century? Who in the the 2nd century, was selling Christianity?
The false teachers.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I just wanted you to explain who these false teachers were, but you were already doing so. Please go forward.
So, like anything, if you are going to create something, it doesn't happen overnight. So these false teachers who were, as we discussed during Should Christianity Be Sold Part 1, and we talked about those that were actually a part of the children of Israel that were actually not called Christians. So we went into detail, and again, for anybody that didn't see that first part and they're just tuning in, I would encourage them to go back. We went into detail identifying certain people. We talked about Festus, the Roman governor, and that he was sitting with King Agrippa, who would be considered an Israelite. But he himself said, but I'm not a Christian. He would not have been one of the disciples of those that would have been following after Yeshua. So we had those that were, even though they were called Israelites, and people looked to them as like, oh, these people must really know what's going on. They were actually in the process, even during that time, of selling Christianity. And so when you get into the whole selling, there's this process, there's this mock-up. There's a lot of work and legwork that has to be done. If anybody's been in the art of selling, you just don't start selling stuff and starting to see anything come from it. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid. So these false teachers that were actually of the Israelites, that were actually themselves converting the Gentiles. It wasn't just the disciples and the followers of Yeshua that were converting Gentiles, which we talked again during Should Christianity Be Sold Part 1, were made up of both the Greeks and the Romans. So it wasn't just the followers of Yeshua that were converting them to discipleship and following him, but also these false teachers were converting Gentiles, both Romans and Greeks, and even trying to convert some of those. And that's what Paul and Peter were talking about when I gave those passages there. They were trying to keep those that had already been converted into the discipleship of Yeshua. They were trying to pull them out as well. So there was a lot of legwork being done there over a period of time. So now when the Roman Catholic Church actually forms and develops, again, and when we see it during the period that you're talking about, it's in full-fledged then. So I'm not going to say that it actually started then. I'm sure there were some betas and stuff that were going on even before that time.
So we read in the last Shabbat that they were called Christians first at Antioch, and they were called this in a derogatory sense. And then we moved forward to say that it wasn't accepted by them for 100 years later or so, that it became an acceptable term to those who were followers of Yeshua. Prior to that time, according to the Vine's Expository Dictionary, they weren't accepting that as a term that they aligned themselves to. But after about 100 years of being called that by, we said Gentiles, right? Because this was not a term that Hebrews, even King Agrippa said, well, you almost got me to think myself as a Christian, but I'm no Christian. And so Hebrews didn't align to that terminology. But those of Antioch, they called them that, aligned them to it, but only in scorn, only in mockery. So I'm still trying to map, and let's go further into Roman Catholicism, because we know in the 2nd century and the 3rd century that it would cost you your life to call yourself a follower of the sect of the way, or the believers, or the disciples, or the Christians. And so most Romans averted being aligned to that, but there was a growing swell of people that were being put to death at that time. And so Christianity, for history teachings anyways, was a persecuted sect of people. They were still growing in number, but not, the Roman Catholic Church had not yet come into existence. It wasn't until Constantine legalized the practice and stopped the persecution and formed the first body of, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Saint, oh man, what's this guy's name? I want to say, man, guys, I apologize. I know how y'all don't believe me when I start making stuff up anyways, but this guy was named Saint Spyridon. Saint Spyridon. 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 You guys may have never heard of this guy, though. Saint Spyridon, he's still honored amongst a lot of the Greeks. They'll have big celebrations in his name on the Isles. But this guy, he was the one to sit with Constantine and sharply debated the Arians on the virtue of who Christ was. And what he did was he took a potsherd. He broke a pot and picked up a piece of it, and he held it in his hand, and he said, "What is this?" And they said, it's pottery. And the man said, "Nope, it's clay, it's water, and it's fire all together." And as he said it, the clay caught on fire. And then water began to drip from his hand, and the only thing that was left was dust. And it was a miracle, because he was showing them the Trinity. And he went on to do a lot of other miracles, supposedly. And so now he's a sainted figure in the Catholic Church. And that was their early beginnings and how they were selling Christianity, by associating all these miracles that they were accomplishing with it. Having said all that, my brother, I'm still trying to go back to see, in that 2nd century, according to Vine's Repository Dictionary, what made those early believers flip. And you're saying that it was other Israelites that were imposters selling them the idea that Christianity was to be valued. The term Christian was to be accepted. And I'm trying to figure out where that happened and who did that, because I can't place it in my mind in history. But I'll leave it there.
Okay, yeah, and that's something that, that's a great question. I'll do some more digging to follow up, because again, when you look at the centuries, when you're talking about the first century and the second century, when you're talking about the time frame there, when you're talking about the latter, because if you're talking, it depends again if you're talking about the latter part of the first part, because that makes a difference. And when he says that they were first accepting of that, again, it's like you were saying, that may not be that groundswell that you're talking about, but that at some point somebody starts off with, and you and I have had these discussions before, everything starts off with a seed. It's not just like something just happens and it just automatically just booms. And so what I'm saying, from what I'm getting from there, and that's a great question that you're asking, and I'll do some more follow-up on it to see if I can get some information out. But what I'm seeing is that up until that time, during the first century, nobody accepted it. Sometime during the second century, whether it be the first part of the second century or the latter part of the second century, there were some people that would accept the term of being called Christian as honorable. And so, again, when we look at the teachings that of Paul and Peter and some of the other disciples, there is this misteaching of things. And so we addressed that during our last Sabbath, when we were talking during Should Christianity Be Sold, Part 1, that people even to this day believe that when Paul was saying that, if you be called a Christian, do it as honorable. So I don't know if that was something that was being mistaught, because that's one of the things that Paul said. We know in teachings that we've done dealing with the rapture, on how he actually had to go back and re-explain what he said, because people ran with that and mistaught it. So he had to end up coming back and reteaching it again. So again, there are some moving parts there, and that's why I'm saying this isn't a complete volume, but I will try to get back and address your question.
No, Brother Jeff, that point that you just made, that last point you made, man, that I can. He even wrote in one of his epistles that if you be disturbed either by letter from us or so forth, not to take it, because it's not me. If it ain't saying what I told you when I was in front of you, don't think that I sent that. So there was some mischief going on even back then. And I can get that. That was a great point you just brought out, brother. So thank you on that one.
Mm-hmm. Great question, though. I'm going to still look up. So that's a good question that you asked. I'm going to see if I can find some more information on that. That's a great question. The line is open. Anybody else have anything? Well, I'm going to take this time just to interject that one of the things that I really found disturbing, but also connecting, was that enslavement part. That that word "sell" means actually to enslave people for profit, and it seems like when churches, the more Christians churches bring in, the more profitable that church becomes. It's just a direct connection, and that's very disturbing to me.
So, Brother Jeff, you bring out yet another great point. So, understanding that, you talked about comparable riches of Catholicism and their tribe in selling and building great wealth. In comparison to today's churches that come under that banner. So we talked about the World Church Federation a few weeks back, and we talked about how all these churches have to flow into the World Church organization that kind of gives them their platforms and smooth the road for them somewhat. But it's always been a connected truth, and that's the thing about truth, is always connecting, so that the church's wealth, as they grow out, they feed that back into a system of government. And that system of government, we call them banks, so that the church, under the auspice of selling Christianity, has an economic apparatus to it that feeds back into the banking systems, where they're housing those resources. And then the banks are, in turn, they say when you put money in a bank, you're loaning the bank your money to do with it what it chooses at zero interest. But when you take money from a bank, you're taking money to do what you want to do with it at a cost of interest. So the church is certainly aligned to that reality, where the scriptures tell us not to do usury, but we see it happening right there inside the churches daily. So,
yeah. Well, and I mean, and just the enslavement part, though, to me, is that because, the piece that they said is that, they enslave you for profit. And so as we got into that first piece of should Christianity be sold, and what Christian really means, Christanos in the Greek. And so they get you to follow after this unholy and profane Messiah. They lock you into it. And so, as we've talked before, once people get locked into that, it's hard to break them and free them from what they've been enslaved to. And that's one of the things that is just sad, is that, they are actually enslaving these people to something that they should know is not right. And not only do they know it's not right, but once they do that, it's hard to break them out of that. It's hard to break them out of that. And, even as you were talking about, about the Catholic Church and Constantine and the saint that he met with and all of that. But again, what I'm saying is that there are factions, like you just talked about the world church. The world church didn't start off having a world church. It took a minute for them to get to that point. There were smaller groups that kept meeting, and then they kept getting a little bigger, and then they kept getting a little bigger, and then they kept getting a little bigger. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the information, but I'm sure it was probably, maybe a quarter of a century, if not more, before you had a world church, because you had these underlings that kept going, and they just kept building into more and more things. And so, again, when Yeshua told us and warned us, that these things were going to happen, that these people, these Christs, plural, and these prophets, plural, would be coming. That's what I'm looking at, is that there was a bunch of them coming, and they were all doing this. And then, so it wasn't like they were waiting on the Roman Catholic Church to do anything. They were already doing this, and then at some point, it all just kind of came together to where it's like, hey, we're all doing the same thing. We all are, in unison. We're lockstep. So we might as well go ahead and combine this and make this money, and, keep selling these Christian, keep recruiting these Christians and enslaving them and getting paid for it. So again, that timeline, I think, is like, you can't look at it as like, oh, bam, it just happened. It was already happening. The things that were going on, and at some point it finally came to the, what's the word I'm looking for? The formalization of something.
Brother Jeff, I want to make, because it's being recorded, I know we talk casually many times, but those that may listen down the path may not, understand. But the term that I was trying to use was the World Council of Churches, the WCC, the World Council of Churches, that they formed to bring them under a single umbrella, kind of organized. But Jeff, there was a vision that I got many years ago, and I was walking on a path, and I came to a fork in the road. When people talk about the fork in the road, I came to a fork in the road, and it appeared to me that both paths would take me to my destination because it was heading in the right direction, but there was a fork in the road, and I had to choose which path I was going to follow. And as I began to follow the path, I started noticing that the other path was getting wider and wider apart. As I moved down that path, eventually the two paths were completely separate, and I was going in different directions. And many times that's how truth is. When we come to it, there's a fork in the road. That if you choose, that if your option is to follow at that fork, that point of decision, if your option is to follow that deception, and it may seem like a small deception at the time, but if you continue to follow it, it'll get you further and further from the path that's narrow. And so you can start off with a sincere desire to want to follow the Creator, but after a while, if you take the wrong path, what makes it so difficult for people to come back is that they may have started with a sincere heart, but they've invested so much time, so much belief, so much of their life energy into that path that it's hard for them to accept that loss of saying, I've been wrong all my life. I've been following the wrong path all these years, and I can't change now. If I'm wrong, I'm just going to be wrong until my death, because I've sacrificed too much in this path. I've traveled too far in this path to come off of it. But that's what truth will do. And he said, think not that I came to bring peace, but I came to bring division. I came to bring you to that fork in the road. That'll preach one day. I'm going to preach a sermon called Fork in the Road one day.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
No, that's great stuff, Brother Greg. And, I just find it interesting, from, generation to generation. So if you go back to Noah, to Enoch, there's two generations, right? And the word of the Most High is carried sufficiently, adequately, truthfully between those generations. You go from Noah to Abraham, there's multiple generations. And they back then they lived a long time, so a generation was 100 years. Right? A generation was a century. Right? And again, the word of the Most High was carried, adequately and truthfully. And then when you go from Abram and you go all the way down to David, right? Again, that word, was carried, truthfully, right? And then when you get from David to Yeshua, right? It what starts that new and better covenant.
Right.
Right? That word is carried. And then when you get from, it's just funny, from when you get from Yeshua to a couple of 100 years past Yeshua, that things start to get crazy. Multiple versions of the Messiah, right? And then there's these false teachings. And now we live, now that's not to say that during all that time, all that history of man up to them, there weren't other versions of Elohim, right? As a matter of fact, that the scripture tells us that there are people that study other gods. But we never see through Scripture that those other gods were different versions of the Creator of all, right? They were just people that they were mostly other gods that other men had created with their hands, right? That they just chose to worship.
Right.
So it's just interesting to me, right, that in the span of a couple of hundred years, there's multiple versions of the Messiah, and that now that we've spun ahead, even when you get to 300, 400, 500 years, now there's multiple sects that are part of what they call Christianity, right? And so if there's one God, which I truly believe there's only one, right? I mean, even from an intellectual perspective, how do you get to multiple practices, right, within the umbrella of Christianity, right? So you should question that in the early part of modern, in the 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way up to the 18th century, right? And then 19th century. And then you just see a proliferation of religions that ascribe to the thought of Christianity. And so now you get to, modern day, where we're just in hyperdrive around the multiple religions that ascribe to be a part of one God. So just even from an intellectual perspective, even if you're not, if you don't, ascribe to one, but you're just looking at the landscape and understand and reading the word. There's one God, right? And if you believe in one God, then how can you reconcile yourself with all of these religions? Even if you, how do you know that the sect that you're in, Baptist or Methodist, or how do you know you're ascribing to the right practices? And so, that's just the questioning, that should come to folks' mind as they're even locked in, as Brother Greg said, to these different sects. Don't you ever look over your shoulder and be like, well, wait a minute, what are we doing so much better and different than these other people who, who are a part of this one God? Can we all be on that narrow path? That should really be the questioning around folks. Even if you don't believe all the arguments that you so eloquently laid out as to how Christianity is sold, even if you don't ascribe to all that, right? Just use your mind, right? And connect the dots, right? Don't let anybody sell you anything, including us, right? Just connect the dots.
Hallelujah.
And see, does it line up? That's all we're asking.
Yeah.
Well said, brother.
Well, the interesting thing that you said, though, that really kind of, again, validates the whole selling process is that, people that are salesmen, they can go.
Brother Jeff, you froze up. I don't know if you know that.
Pardon me?
Did he freeze up in your screen or just mine?
No, he froze.
Yeah, you froze, man. No, you back moving now.
Okay.
So what you said? You got to repeat your statement.
Okay, so the interesting thing to me is that what you were just talking about how we have all of these different sects of religions, is that a good salesperson can carve out their niche in whatever market there is. And so even though it's already established people selling, they can carve out a little different, a little nuance that will allow them to be able to sell and still be profitable. And that's really what Christianity is. That's really the whole thing about should it be sold. Because like you're saying, I mean, there's all of these sects, and they just keep on going, and really a sect now that I don't even know if people are really identifying and connecting it with, but this whole QAnon is really a part of a Christian movement, and they're making gobs of money off of that, man. So people can always, a good salesperson can always come and carve out a market. I mean, go into a market and carve out their own little niche where they can still make money, even though you already got big fish already swimming. They can carve out a piece where they can still feed off of some of the smaller fish there and make money. And that's what Christianity is, man.
No, you're very right. That's exactly what it is. And that's why I say you've just got to be able to pull the thread on it, though. Right? Yeah. As a human being, you've got, and if you're really invested, see, that's the other piece. If you're really invested in being a child of the Most High, if that really means something to you, and you're not just following a script or, turning in your paper because, it's time to turn in your assignment. If you're really trying to understand and discern truth, you've got to be able to pull the thread on your set. You've got to be able to pull the thread on being a Baptist, right? And line that all the way up to the word of the Most High, right? Line it up to the word of the Messiah, right? You've got to line, no matter what your religion is, you've got to see, and don't let them tell you that it lines up. No, let you see for yourself. You read the word and ask the Lord for discernment of his word and see if any of it lines up. I guarantee you none of it will line up. I guarantee you none of it will line up. It's all slightly different, and they're all based on an already false baseline. So you can't get the truth when your baseline is already off. Right? And so that's the thing. That's why that ecclesia, the called out ones, you're called out from those that false baseline. And when you pull the thread, it lines all the way up the chain to the Most High.
Yeah.
In his words. Because what he says in the words, those feast days that he said to keep, we keep. Those, the actual Shabbat, he said on the seventh day, he set it aside, not for him, he made it for us. Right? He made the Shabbat for us. Him and his angels of sanctification and his angels of presence celebrate this day every week. The seventh day, not the first day. Again, it lines up. It lines up.
Well,
go ahead.
To your point, I think you're making a very interesting point. Is that are people really that serious about it, or is it more of a accepted club that you have to be a part of? I mean, I don't want to get too off into this, but I was sharing with Brother Gregory this week about how it really baffles me how people can call people men or women of God, like, oh, that's a godly man or that's a godly woman or whatever. It's like, but if you were to really take stock in that person, really what you would see is the majority of their time is spent on something other than the Most High. So for people then to make that statement, it's almost like, well, why would you make that statement? I mean, that's really not, if somebody were to really take stock and like, well, what does this person really do? it wouldn't be doing the Most High's work. So then why would you make that, go out and make that statement about this person being a godly person or something like that? I mean, when you really look at it, to me, it just seems like people are in a state of like, okay, I'm doing what I really want to do or what I feel that I've been called to do. And then I'll do some other things, on the side. And because most people just do the things that they are called to do, and if they do something, they help somebody or whatever, then they'll call that person a godly person. But really, I don't think that the godly part is really where the emphasis is. The real emphasis for most people is what their day job is. That's really what they're, like you said. Now, if it was something concerning, if you're a financial person and you saw inflation going up or down or this or that happening, you'd lock in, and like you said, you better pull that thread. Then it would be that would just be a no-brainer, because that's what you're really locked into. I don't really think, to your point, I don't really think when you said if this is something that people are really into, they're not just checking the box and just turning it into paper. Sadly, I think that's really when it comes to religion, and in the people's defense, that the religious leaders have allowed it to become that way. That, really this is all you have to do in order to be able to check the box and turn the paper in is, show up on the first day of the week and put some money in the box and, smile and do those kind of things. If you do that, then, that's really, you don't really have to focus on that. You don't have to focus on that. You don't have to go in and think and look and pull threads. You don't have to do any of that. But now in your day job, you have to do that. And people do that each and every day on their day job. But they won't do that when it comes to the Most High's work. But yet and still people, make that term, oh yeah, that's a godly person, that's a godly woman, that's a godly man. And I'm like, and again, it's like, that's your choice to call them that. But I mean, you don't really have to tell me, because, I was sharing with Brother Gregory, is that, Yeshua himself said that, when they tried to call him just good, they didn't even call him godly. They just tried to call him good. He said, ain't no man good except the Most High. So for us to go out and call anybody godly, that's even ratcheting it up from good. It just doesn't make sense. But to your point, really where I'm going, Dean, I don't think people really spend that time. I don't really think it's that high on their priority list to really connect back to what you were saying.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. I was thinking about this last night, actually, is that they think they've already checked the box on the first commandment just by showing up on Sunday.
Yeah.
So what their focus is on that second commandment: love one another.
Right.
Right? Or love thy neighbor as thyself. And so when you hear that moniker associated with an individual, it's really the focus is on that second commandment, that they love people.
Right.
That they do, that they do for people, that they're caring people.
Right.
And Yeshua said, well, those two commandments, all the other ones hang on those two.
Right.
And they've been brainwashed, they've been sold into believing that they're fulfilling that first commandment.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Of loving the Most High with all their heart, mind, body, and spirit by showing up on Sunday.
That's what I'm saying.
And
church have allowed that to happen.
That's exactly it, Brother Jeff. And I mean, but that said, really, that's packaged up well. You're already fulfilling that first commandment because you're showing up on Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, what you really need to focus on is that second commandment, and you're good to go, which these quote unquote godly people tend to focus on because they believe that they're fulfilling the assignment of the first commandment. And then that is the misconception, because you're really not at all. Right? Right. Not partially. You're not at all fulfilling that first commandment. But but that's why he's going to give. He says, that my peoples suffer for a lack of knowledge, right? And that's why he's going to give them that opportunity to take, Satan away and evil away, so that they actually learn, right? That second judgment, so that they actually know his ways. And those people who are good, really good people, I should say, really trying to do the right thing, believing that they're doing the right thing, that evil, those salesmen will be taken out of the picture, so that they can do the right thing, and they will come to him. So that's you don't have to get it the first time around. That's all right. And people, those ministers that tell you, no, this is it, one life, and you got to get it, and if you close your eyes and you ain't got it, then you go to there's no hope for you. Don't believe those guys. Right? Don't believe those guys. The Lord understands how evil the evil one is, and how you've been, coerced, and how he's been misrepresented. He's going to give you another shot. So, but blessed is them that get it on the first go round.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Anybody else have any comments on Should Christianity Be Sold? Part 2. Or putting the whole package together. I mean, I think it really is I think the part 1, just really understanding the whole Christian piece, and then the selling of it, I think it really shows, because again, I mean, if we really haven't touched on that, is that, you're being sold into following an unholy and a profane Messiah. I mean, when you really put that whole package together, should Christianity be sold? That's what people are packaged to do. They're enslaving people to then go and worship exactly what Christian means, is to worship an unholy and profane Messiah. Enslaving them into that for money. That's the selling piece. And then they get paid for doing that. It's mind-boggling when you really stop and think about it. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I was at the I don't even know what it's called, but the big Billy Graham place here in Charlotte. He's got a big whole campus there, and they actually have a monitor TV of all the people that they show or that convert to Christianity. I mean, like, what do you call it? It's real time. In real time, there's a number, it's a ticker there, and it's ticking. All these people are converting to Christianity, and you really understand, should Christianity be sold? It's like they need to know that, so they can start trying to figure out how much money they're going to get from this new convert. I mean, that when I really, when the Most High gave me this message, a couple years or so ago, I mean, it really just let me see that, like, okay, yeah, they're counting their sales, basically. So, okay, I sold this, so I should get paid, X number of dollars. It's mind-boggling. And when we looked at the examples that Yeshua and his disciples did when they were sharing and warning not to do this, they weren't doing it for nothing. They were just giving you the information. They didn't receive anything for it.
And the real evidence of that is try to have one of your loved ones, when one of your loved ones pass away, and you go to any random church, any Christian religion, and try to have that individual buried, and try to have a minister, give the eulogy at a church where you didn't contribute to. just try it for yourself, right? Just you know, when one of your loved ones pass away, you just try to go, hey, look, because we're all supposed to be, right, love one another, right? So you try to go to a church where you didn't contribute to those coffers, right? Where you didn't build a pew, where you didn't help, you know, build that stand, and try to have one of your loved ones buried at that church, you know, taking up that minister's time, and try to have, as a good, you know, Christian, you know, a good human being, to have that minister administer over your loved one's funeral and see what the answer is.
Well, I'm sure Sybil probably won't share, but she had a good friend that went to Fred Price's church. You know, I mean, you know, big, huge church. I mean, and this woman, she, you know, spent a lot of time, you know, money invested in the church, but her husband didn't. When he passed away, they would not allow her to have the funeral services at that church. Her husband. Now, she had donated time, money, you know, sweat, you know, all of that for years. And it's a big church. You know, Fred Price Church is a huge church. Everybody knows Fred Price. Frederick Price.
Yep.
Would not allow her to have her husband's funeral at the church because he was not a member. Like you said, they didn't see where he has put he did not put 5 on it, as they say. He didn't put nothing on it. So it's like, nah, we sorry, but you can't. That blew me away. I thought surely, you know, I mean, like you said, Brother Dean, okay, but if it's her spouse, okay, we'll give him the quick, you know, the quick and dirty, you know, but they like, no.
Yep. Oh, time is money.
Yeah.
And
but that's a real experience. I've seen it myself. It ain't even just a speculation. I've actually seen and witnessed that myself.
That's where that rubber, see, that's where the real rubber meets the road, right? That's where the real rubber meets the road, where you see just how propped up and how a false storefront that religion truly is, right? When you should ascribe to, you know, to the belief of the Most High, right? Of loving Him first, loving, you know, thy neighbor as yourself, and as Yeshua said in the New Testament, just because you know, he knew that there'd be these people of the old covenant and the new covenant. He said, no, I'm going to give it to you again just so you understand, love one another. Right? That's not just an old covenant thing. That's a new and better covenant too. Love one another as I have loved you. Right? And so when you go to test it, and that's really testing, right? When you try to put that loved one away, wait a second, and they come back to you with time is money, and you ain't put no money in, so I ain't giving you the time.
Well, you know what's so interesting, tying this into the should Christianity be sold, and that selling is actually an enslavement for money, is that why am I putting any money out for something that's not going to bring me any money? I mean, the slave is no longer of any value. They're gone. So I'm not going to invest any money in something that's not going to bring anything back. You know, I mean, you know, a slave, dies or whatever. They let the slave hands deal with that. They're not going to do nothing to, you know, the slaves, the other surrounding slaves will, you know, have something for them. But the master of the plantation ain't putting up no works or nothing for a slave that dies. They trying to replace him with another one.
That's right. That's exactly it.
So again, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, really, it goes back to, you know, I've shared this with you guys before, that whole Matrix movie, that especially the first part one, the other ones kind of get a little weird, but that part one, it's the same scenario to me, man, that people just are not aware of what's even going on around them, that they're actually just being used. They're actually just being used to prop up other people. It's sad. Should Christianity be sold? No. No. All right, great comments. Anybody else have any other comments or questions or concerns? Anything not, you know, Brother Gregory brought us something that was good. I'm going to try to get back and see if I can do some more delving into that. But again, anybody have any questions about the timeline, what's going on? Because again, if you do, this is an open forum. Okay. Okay. Well, if there's no further comments or questions or concerns, we will close this recording out. All right. Peace and blessings to everybody.